let's go. Alright, let's see how expediently we can do this. We are on an actual studio time schedule. Things to do, Specter skeleton things to do. And if possible, we would like to squeeze in 2 of these electronic, visual, audio, social media messages. Lovely. Well, we're not telling a story right now, at least not yet, so we'll put this down. For a moment. For a moment. In the feature film, My Cousin Vinny, the character of Mona Lisa Vito, played by Marissa Tomei, she is described as an out-of-work hairdresser as her occupation. However, it's also disclosed that she has automotive knowledge, extensive, very complex. She knows a lot about cars and engines and stuff. And she explained how she knows this. Her brothers were mechanics, father was mechanic, mechanics, she grew up around mechanics. She grew up around auto mechanics. No doubt she most likely did. Oh yeah, she even admits that she even helped rebuild transmissions, things like that. She learned, as it is described, vicariously. Admittedly, though, her vicariousness is a little bit more than just she happened to be around and learned. It seems like she was doing a little more actual learning, deliberate learning, but not that she was. It was in her intent. It was not her intent to become a mechanic, but being around mechanics and around that type of environment all her life, she's going to learn things, and this is what we want to get into right now. Learning things vicariously. People do this, especially people who are very observant. They may learn things even though they had no intent on it, but because of their given circumstances and their environments, they do. And we're going to get to this in regards to a situation that occurred with Mr. Vane. And then we'll tell you some more about some things with that. Back in 2001 to 2002, Mr. Vane lived with at the time, his girlfriend. And even subsequently with his girlfriend's stepsister, much to Mr. Vane's disdain. But anyway, there was a day one time when the sisters, Mr. Vane's girlfriend and her stepsister, I'll just call them sisters, versus Mr. Vane. Okay? you might have an idea of how that's going to go. Two headstrong girls just want to team up and argue with Mr. Vane for whatever reason. They were discussing something of a medical nature. And it really wasn't, it came to a point where it really wasn't about the medical discussion. It was more about the sisters wanting to prove Mr. Vane wrong. They wanted to be right. They wanted Mr. Vane to be wrong, just so they could be right. Okay, fair enough. This happens. Mr. Vane kept answering their questions to the best of his knowledge. And then it came to a point where he had stumped them. He had answered a question, he had made some statements in regards to the medical field, in which the sisters had no retort, except for to say, just to Mr. Vane, they said to Mr. Vane, just because you work in medical records doesn't mean you are a doctor, so to speak. To that effect. Might not have been the exact words, but you get the idea. They were saying just because Mr. Vane worked with medical records, which he did at the time, didn't mean he was a medical expert. True. Absolutely true. He had very limited, he worked with medical records, which were patient records, which, due to Privacy Act, you're not supposed to be reading anyway. And really, to deal with medical records, you don't have to have any kind of medical knowledge. You just need to know how to read, alphabetize, and count. Basically it. But Mr. Vane had been doing the job for a few years and was even at the time in a supervisory type of position. Now, beyond just dealing with medical records, Mr. Vane also constantly had to interact with medical personnel, actual trained medical personnel throughout a large medical office building. And so, vicariously, he's going to pick up a few things. Nurses and whatever, they love to give medical advice for whatever reason, especially to staff and nothing, I'm not going to say they shouldn't be giving medical advice. Just casual, hey, I'm a nurse, you got this joint on this thing on your hand, it's probably this, check it out, do this, da-da-da-da, whatever. So, there's some vicarious information coming in to Mr. Vane in that way. Alright, so he's going to learn a little bit more. Now, let's go further to Mr. Vane's vicarious medical knowledge. His dad was an orthopedic technician. When Mr. Vane was born, up till that moment, his dad had been an orthopedic technician. Mr. Vane was always around his dad. Mr. Vane was always around staff of the medical profession due to the fact that his dad worked in the medical profession. So Mr. Vane grew up around medical professionals. His dad, right there in particular. Not only that, his mother was a nurse's aide in her youth. She knew a few things. Our vicarious education of Mr. Vane into the medical field has now gone up. But he doesn't know anything because he works in medical records. Oh, by the way, did we mention Mr. Vane was in a horrific car accident in which he broke his back and subsequently had to see doctors and doctors for medical reasons constantly after that. He was constantly having to go to see doctors. for one reason or the other. Guess what? Vicariously more. Mr. Vane's medical knowledge had gone up. Now, Mr. Vane would never presume to be a surgeon or anything, do anything stupid like that. But to be able to answer a few medical questions, his knowledge would make him more than likely capable. However, as I pointed out, the argument wasn't about the sisters getting information anymore. It became an argument of them just wanting to prove Mr. Vane wrong and themselves right. People like that are dangerous. People like that who are more committed to being correct than they are to the truth are dangerous people. Now, what happens if one of these types of people, one of these dangerous people who prefer to be right all the time rather than accept the truth and be wrong, maybe? Okay, so you're wrong. Deal with it. You're a better person if you can deal with the fact that you're wrong and accept the truth. You can make better changes and better decisions if you accept the truth, accept the fact that you are incorrect. Now, the problem is when dangerous people like that are found in positions of power, so to speak. I'm talking about law enforcement personnel. I'm talking about judicial personnel, such as judges or whatnot. Or, of course, even worse, government leaders, government officials, and, of course, especially government leaders who think they know everything but know very little. Because they'd rather be right than accept the truth. These people are dangerous. Now, what can you do about these people? Well, see, in Mr. Vane's case, dealing with these wannabe right sisters as opposed to the truth sisters, all he could do was just back off. There was no point in going on with the conversation or the argument. Just accept it. It's not gonna hurt anything for him to just accept whatever they're gonna do this. Not so easy when that person is in a position that can cause great amounts of damage to the world around them. What is the point of what we are saying here? The best thing I could say is do not allow yourself to fall into this category of I'd rather be right than accept the truth. What can you do about people in this kind of position that are in a position of power? That remains to be seen. The truth. Stick to the truth. What do you do? We'll be back in a minute with another little thing. A little different subject. But we got out what we wanted to get out about this. We never said we were here with answers. We're just here. And I am just an observer. Don't be a minion.